What's up, Zox fam? Now, what's the new game plan? We got to get into what we're doing going into global release because there were definitely a lot of changes that were made in the game. And I definitely think it's really important to making sure that you guys are getting the best start possible. So let's go ahead and let's dive right into it. Starting out with the permanent summon banner. This is the first banner I'll be targeting personally just because it's going to allow me to be able to flesh out my account and being able to build up some of that unit diversity. Now, for those of you guys that are re-rolling and specifically for LD, let's talk about it, okay? What are my top three that I feel like players are going to more than likely go for or should go for? Number one is going to be Lily. I think her value is just undeniable at this point. I think she is the best LD in the game. And when we're talking about like her combinations, who she could be paired up with, I mean, the twin trick is literally that ability, right? It allows you to get the assist, you get the turn meter push, you're then going to be able to give the speed up buff to your entire party, and then if they have this specific buff with the twin trick, they get the crit damage up, and then of course that very last skill, which is going to allow you when it is max to reset all the skill cooldowns on the ally with the twin trick. That is just again what gives her crazy value, because remember, the thing that you're going to be lacking the most is going to be those lattices, and so yeah, that right there screams value. Again, her pairing is just like insane. She literally can be paired with almost anyone. So yeah, Lily, PvE, PvP. I mean, there's that, right? You cannot deny it. Now, next up, I would definitely say that another unit that's going to have extreme value, and it's actually one of the newer units. I'll probably have her pop up at some point, is going to be Miyu, okay? Miyu is the new SSR constant unit coming into the game, and she's going to be a CC freeze as well as a turn meter stilling unit. Now, the thing with the reason why I say she's kind of creeped herself into my top three is because of the fact that we have some adjustments made to Kraken and Marll. Now, one thing that I will say that I definitely do agree with what some players made a point, which I always kind of thought this anyway, but it's the idea that when you kind of look at, like, granted, yes, you can obtain like your LDs from like these like standard banners and things of that nature, but if you ever go to pull on the limited banner for LDs, dude, it is like literally way more in price, right? You're spending 3,000. Granted, they're lowering the pity or the cap on it for, you know, how many pulls you have to do at max, but it is still significantly more. So the value of those units not being good is not really good for the game, because if people are spending those crazy quantities of crystals for it, and then the value of those units are just bad, then that's not going to be good for the game, right? I think that is something I could definitely agree to. And so Miyu, I think, like, you know, with some of the adjustments you've seen, which were, you know, to like Kraken, some of his pushback, was, you know, adjusted. Also, Marll had a lot of his turn meter still like reduced. So I don't think that those units are necessarily unusable, but I think what's going to happen is that those units aren't going to offer nearly as much progression push as they were before without being in a proper comp. Like, they're not just going to bring all this value to where they just are kind of making everything work. They got to be put with something else. And I feel like that also was done so that Miyu's value didn't get overshadowed. So that, I think, again, with what she does is going to be something that is extremely valuable, because the other thing that's really important about a character like Miyu is that what also made Marll so potent is his attribute. A lot of people aren't talking about that part, but the attribute makes such a huge difference, because being able to be massively utilized because you're, you know, attribute neutral is huge, right? Like, being able to be slotted into basically anything, if you can still turn meter, you just work. That was something I still think that makes Kraken work, is the fact that even if he doesn't get the CC freeze, he still can push back, right? So that, I think, you know, is, you know, still worth mentioning. Now, of course, with Miyu, I think the things to consider obviously is skill up investment, but I still think when we're talking about, you know, her value compared to some of the other LDs, it's going to give you a lot more value in PvE and then, of course, into your PvP. Now, in my top three, I would say it's kind of a toss-up between Doki Doki and Heinrich, but for two different reasons. Doki Doki, I think, is still going to be really nice because she's able to, again, reduce cooldowns, which I think is really important, especially when you're talking about, again, the lack of latices that you're going to be having as you're progressing. And then, of course, she's able to, you know, push turn meter, which I think is still really nice. And, you know, of course, with her being able to then buff damage and then speed, I mean, that's still really good utility. Like, I still think that paired up with the purifying that she's able to do as well. I mean, dude, like, we can't act like that's not great utility. So I know, like, Lily gets hyped up a lot, which is definitely well-deserved, but Doki Doki is still really, really good. Now, Heinrich, I think a lot of players learned this beta, like we were trying to tell them, Heinrich is not necessarily a DPS in PvE. He's more of a debuffer and a buff stiller, or despeller. But in PvP, he definitely can do, more damage. And that's just because you got to remember, like, stat values and scaling changes when you're doing PvE versus, like, PvE. So, or PvP versus PvE. So with a character like Heinrich, I still think he's going to still be one of the best characters for really the simple fact that he has the Reaper's Gaze, which makes him really nice on auto for being able to buff strip and then also being able to scale damage. So that crit damage taken, the chance of critting is huge when you pair him up with any character that's able to crit, right? And that's something that I really think is like, kind of his bread and butter. The buff blocking also helps out significantly as well. So yeah, I feel like, again, Heinrich is kind of in that toss up, but ultimately it would be Lily, Mew, and then Doki Doki or Heinrich, right? I feel like if you get any one of those, really, I would say leaning more towards Lily and Mew first. I feel like you would actually be, in a pretty solid spot. But yeah, that's my take on the LDs, okay? Okay, so let's shift into our RGBs. Let's start with the elephant in the room, Tiamat, man. What is the take on Tiamat, man? I feel like, it's one of those things when we're talking about a character that I feel like, is so heavily pushed, a must-have on your account. Seeing her get the nerf that she's gotten is quite significant, right? Like, I definitely don't want to, like, undermine the nerf, right? The nerf was definitely pretty significant to some of the components of what makes her tick. For example, the healing on her, I think it was reduced about like 66%. And then on top of that, healing received, it's like 25% less effective. So it's definitely a pretty big deal. But in the sense of what relevancy it has, it's more so about being able to counter Tiamat than just like making her bad. I don't think that necessarily makes her a bad unit. I think what this also is going to shift is how you have to build her. So I think one of the biggest things too is that we're not really going to necessarily see too many speed Tias anymore. I think it's going to be very, very important that you kind of have to make up for the lack of healing potency that she had before with more raw bulk, and trying to make her a lot more tankier. So going for more defensive layering, even I would argue the pairing, right? So even some of the pairings that you were using, having pairings that help enable more of her kit is going to be really, really important. So I think, again, that's kind of the scope with this entire game. It's not necessarily just so much about the individual unit, but it's also about the pairing. Now, I will say for me personally, with Tiamat, I still will say like her damage is going to still be there. You still have the shield, you have the heal over time. Like these things are still going to be, even the damage share, right? But I feel like with those things, you have to now be a lot more mindful because she's not just going to be able to, be really close to death and then get all her HP back almost, right? So I think, again, though, when we're talking about the progressive nature of this character, do I think she's still going to have relevancy? Yeah, I think she is going to still be a character that's going to have her moments. It's still going to be able to shine, especially when you get to some of those end game shells like Amber. Like for example, like I think players are forgetting about that, like, right? Like that instantly makes her like kind of insane if she's able to build up those bloodshed stacks. But yeah, I feel like for what it was worth, Tiamat was oppressive, right? I think it's as simple as we can say it. And I feel like for my personal like approach to the game, I don't think that she's necessarily a must have for me personally. I think she's nice to have. I think there's a little bit of a difference there. So that's just kind of, my thought on that. With that, okay, let's talk about it. Some of the units that obviously I definitely am looking forward to getting. Hellkid is another one. Hellkid, I mean, again, it's still Hellkid. I think the thing with Hellkid, you put him on count, the pet count, and yeah, you're getting crazy, attack scaling for the shield, which is going to make that just scale even more, just makes it more bulky. And then you also get the HP restoration from count as well from the damage you're dealing. So Shroud Barrier with the built-in immunity is huge. It's just something that I think is just just, again, going to be absolutely astronomical for progression. And then even the attack down and the stun and the skill 1, I still think that Hellkid is going to be one of my top choices. Veronica is now back in play, guys. One of the funny things about Veronica is that, like, the one thing, like, literally made her unplayable was this, like, and not even unplayable. Nobody just wanted to play her just because they're like, I don't want to deal with a 50% chance of her buff spreading. They brought that back up to 100%. So she's definitely back in play now because that's literally where her kit was before. So yeah, this is just like, now we're going to see Veronica City all day. I definitely would say, like, in terms of on start, though, Veronica is going to be a unit that's definitely going to now be a lot better in, like, TMAT because that 50% spread kind of cooked that a little bit. But she's definitely going to be able to work in, like, the areas that she's able or needs to be able to steal. So I think even, like, if you're using her in something like Aurora, or if you're using her in something like TMAT, she's going to be great, right? Like, she's still going to work really, really well there. So Veronica is going to be nice, I feel like, for that type of content, if that's something you're interested in. And I think she's going to be even more insane now, again, in PvP. So there's kind of that, right? Now, I would definitely say another top pick for me, or unit that I want to make sure I snag, is definitely going to still be close. I know a lot of people are looking at, like, oh, she no longer is going to have the speed, decreased speed in her hacking in progress. I don't think that that's necessarily, like, a thing that kills her. All it's doing is it's making her combinations change, right? Like, I think that that's, like, one of the biggest things for that is that she still has all the damage amp. Like, they didn't touch any of that. It's just changing the oppressiveness of, like, having a speed down and then also being able to have the speed decrease in the hacking in progress. So it's just going to make some of her combinations change a little bit, which, I get it. I get it. It's like, you don't want units to be super oppressive. I think a lot of people were sleeping on close. They didn't realize how, like, OP she actually is. But even then, what they're going to be giving her is a speed down in the skill 3 with the defense down. So I feel like at that point, that's actually going to be changing, like, some of the other picks that you might be going for, because you have to now consider, like, well, do I want characters on the team that are going to also be inflicting a speed down if I'm going to have this character already inflicting a speed down? And Close is still arguably one of the best, if not the best, damage amper in the game, right with Dinah, between the two of them, right? So that's something I think, is still worth mentioning. I still want Close on my account. Easy. Freya obviously is going to be a unit. If you get her from here early, that would be great too. Now, if she's like one of, like, the first ones, probably not necessarily, like, the thing you want. I would say that you still want to try to pick up, characters that are going to be like your damage dealers and stuff like that. Your supports, of course, are going to be really important. Like, again, with her turn meter pushing, the debuffing, the buffing, the damage amp, the healing, all of that stuff is still there. So Freya, I still think, is, like, still in play. Really, really good unit that I definitely think most players, if not all, are going to want on their account. So yeah, there's that, right? Now, of course, from there, I would say the only other character or only two other characters I really would be looking forward to getting would be Sukiomi. And this, again, I think Sukiomi is actually really, really good. Kind of like in, the perspective we look at Lily, I still feel like Sukiomi's kind of sort of like that, in the sense that, like, again, she has the attack speed up buff, but then she's also able to reduce all skill cooldowns for all allies by 1 turn as well. And then she can also push forward the person with the highest attack. So kind of playing in that same spectrum a little bit. So I think Sukiomi is extremely underrated, and I think she is going to be absolutely disgusting when you're able to actually get her built up, which, again, she's a defense scaler. So it's not going to be, like, super crazy. Defense and speed, really, more than anything. And then, of course, Biotin, right? So I would definitely say, like, with those characters in mind. Now, if I had to sum this up and give you guys my top 5 that I would absolutely want on my account, Ramoka, Rahu, Close, I would say Hellkid, and Biotin. Definitely making sure I have Hellkid for sure. Ramoka, I think, would be nice. Ramoka or Rahu, but definitely would like that Ramoka. Close, I think, definitely is a must. I feel like the damage amp is huge from her. So yeah, absolutely want that. And then Biotin, I think, again, her value is insane. So I really like Biotin a lot. So that's definitely a character I would like on my account. Any extras that I would love to have definitely would be Veronica, Tiamat, Sukiomi, and then Freya. Right. I think at that point I'd be pretty content. If I had, like not like say I was missing a couple of those characters, whatever character I would be missing from those choices would basically be what I would use my target summon ticket on. So yeah, there's kind of that. But yeah, that would be my top 5 that I would definitely want on my account. Ling Lao we get for free, right? And even with Born, I mean, granted, I know somebody's gonna say like, well, what about Born? Born did get an adjustment, but Born still isn't gonna necessarily pair well with a lot of the characters that, like, for example, are buffing crit. Like, he can't crit. So I guess that was fair. They did increase his like base, his percentage or multiplier for his attack because yeah, he can't really pair with anyone like that right now. But I will say like those are some of the ones that I would actually target. I feel like, for those that are wondering about Rosa, yes, Rosa is still going to be a really solid unit. The only thing that they adjusted on her was actually the pushback on the skill 1. I think it's like 8% now. Is that going to make her unusable? Heck no. She's still usable. Like, she's still really good for those that want a big brain and take time to play or start with Rosa. She's still not a bad choice for those that want to do that. But yeah, those would be my choices there. All right. So let's talk about the SRs, all right? So we had some SRs adjusted that we really liked. Now, again, I feel like, one of the ones off rip, we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off, Sania. Let's talk about her, okay? I think her value in PvP is definitely going to diminish a lot. I think she will still be used, but not nearly as much, and she's not going to be as oppressive. Like, there's literally guys like, shout out to True Evil, dude. Mans is over here soloing people in RTA with, Sania just because of how her kit kind of works. And like the whole, like, I guess which was a bug apparently. It wasn't something that was supposed to be happening, where she was basically able to still trigger her passive when she was stunned, frozen, petrified, or sleeping. Which, if you don't know where her passive actually is, her passive is Sania stores the power of creation. At the end of the turn, she heals 2 allies with the lowest HP percentage of her max HP and purifies 1 debuff from them. Her healing effect increases for every 1% she loses. So yeah, she was still able to practice even when she was like completely locked down, which I didn't realize was necessarily something she wasn't supposed to be doing, but I guess it wasn't something they wanted her to do. So there's kind of that. And then they also reduced some of the healing potency. So there's that too. I think for what it was worth, that was like really the biggest thing that was kind of enabling her. So I think that kind of now gives more value back to the higher rarity healers, which isn't necessarily the worst thing, but it definitely does kind of, make her maybe like a 3rd pick or 4th pick, like, honestly. So that's that, right? But everything else I still would say is still kind of in play for me. I still would want, like, if we're looking at like the SRs here, I would say for sure Chiaki the Echo is still going to be one that like is still really good. I think even now her value is just kind of where it's at now. When we're talking about even like number 41 actually got nerfed. She's now only going to cap at 20% instead of 35%. That's kind of rough because that was like ultimately what made, number 41 kind of good. Honestly, it's actually what made her one of the best turn meter pushers in the game. But that now is going to be her max on her turn meter push, which actually now makes her like technically worse than Chiaki the Echo. So Chiaki the Echo is going to be coming back to the forefront as that predominant pick. So there's just kind of that. So yeah, having Chiaki the Echo, again, she does counteract everything Terra Matan does, is going to be pretty huge. She's going to be a great pickup. Kraken, okay, let's talk about Kraken a little bit because I feel like with Kraken, this is definitely a character that, we love him, but my boy kind of did get, it got his chances reduced a little bit. Do I think it's like, all ending, he's just not going to work anymore? No, Kraken is still the man. You went from 75% chance to 65% chance on the pushback. And then instead of him having the turn meter push be 35%, it's 30%. And then it's, going from, 60, percent chance to apply the freeze to 50% chance. The only thing that this is really doing is giving you really honestly a chance to be able to counter him, like to deal with him, and it's making him not as oppressive and being able to push back and do things in PvE, which I think for what it's worth, like we do have to consider pacing in the game. I think that's one thing like I don't think a lot of players were considering is like, there is a point at which you do have to kind of determine like when you're progressing too fast and what the developers want us to be doing in terms of progressing, I guess. I will say when it comes down to units like Kraken, I still think he's going to be a super strong unit, especially if you're, still trying to use him for, pairing up with like, even if you still do the Marll like combo, I think they're still going to work. They're just not going to be as oppressive. So they will, I'd say the best way I can put it is it's a little bit more of a risk now, right? With playing that way versus where before it was like you just kind of locked down city. Now it's a little bit more of a risk. I still feel like, again, Kraken is going to be solid for PvE. It's just maybe some of that PvP oppressiveness is going to shift a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we have Mew coming into the game, so there's that too. So, I mean, yeah, there's that, right? But I still feel like Kraken's going to be pretty solid, even with some of the adjustments. I definitely will say another one that I think is going to be a really good pickup is going to be Kazumi Kazuyo. I think a lot of players weren't realizing how much value she brings to an account, but she actually is able to apply a speed up buff and reduce cooldowns. Again, remember the thing you're lacking the most is lattices, and also you're going to be needing things like speed up. That's going to help you out tremendously. She can also bring down a target's skill cooldown as well, increase their skill cooldown. So that actually is going to make her pretty nice for ISO targeting as well. If you decide to rotate her into like some PvP, I would say for sure. Even when we're looking at like, go back now. Dinah, I still think is going to be really good. The thing with her that was adjusted, which, some players care about, some don't. I mean, really the thing with her was like the turn meter still. They did adjust that some on her. So I feel like, was I using her for that? No, we don't really care about that. I mean, to be honest, even the increase to turn meter went from 10% to 6%. I mean, that was a nice extra additive, but all I care about is her being able to hit hard or enabling me to hit hard, right? So that defense up, vulnerability, erosion is still the same. Nothing else is different about her. She's going to be an amazing pickup, right? So that's another SR that I definitely would say you would want on your account. Of course, you're going to have Gray, which you get for free. I definitely will say, looking at some of the light dark SRs, I would say one of the top choices here, top units to try to snag, and a lot of people are going to be probably shocked, is going to be Valyrian, right? Valyrian's value is nuts, by the way, guys. Like, I don't think a lot of people actually realize like how impactful she is, but she's really, really good, okay? So Valyrian, for sure, is going to be a unit I would definitely say with the Hazy Dream is going to be nuts. You got the shield, you have the death prevention mechanic, you have the basic buff effect, which fills in buffs that you don't have. You have the invincibility proc, you have the heal over time. Chick is stacked, right? I still feel like Valyrian's value is going to be pretty huge. She's definitely a character you want to progressively build her up. Like, I know some players probably got her in the very beginning, was like, oh, she sucks, but you got to actually put stuff on her. Like, you got to invest in her skills for sure. And she is insane. Like, especially that skill 3, man. Like, that character ends up becoming an absolute monster. Being able to start the battle and then immediately gaining one turn of Hazy Dream is nuts, right? So Valyrian definitely is going to be a unit you want to pick up. Unfortunately, Victor kind of got nerfed into the ground, so not necessarily a go-to, in my opinion, at this point, but the Ting is still going to be one. I still think that kind of further emphasized him a little bit more. The Ting's like damage is nothing changed. I mean, to be honest, so he's still like super crazy, super cracked. The vulnerability is huge. You have the passive for the conversion of crit into crit damage, and then being able to mark his target as well with the lowest HP, which is still really nice, and that's going to be great for like your Terramatan, things of that nature. And then, of course, I would say outside of that, Marll, man, I feel like, man, like let's talk about it, guys, because Marll, my guy. I still feel like Marll is usable, but I think his PvE usage is gonna drop, right? Because they not only did they reduce like the turn meter pushback into skill 1, but they also reduced his turn meter pushback in hhis skill 3. Which means that, like, granted, people are looking at that. It's like, it's only 10%. But the thing is that the thing is that, like, with that being adjusted, it wasn't just so much that they're even like just adjusting those parameters, but they're also increasing the cooldown. That hurts. I will say the most, right? The cooldown increase is what really gets it. So I would say, like, because of the res down, that's still something that's going to be super and fairly unique to him. So I still think he's going to work, but he's not going to be as nearly as oppressive. So if you thought you were going to, pick Marvel and just ooga booga everything, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case anymore. It's going to take you longer to be able to do things. And the skill cooldown is going to now at max be 5 turns instead of 4. So it just is what it is, right? Like, it just is what it is, right? Like, we gotta roll with the punches. I mean, again, guys, I think it is also really important to note none of this stuff has been officially released. So all the adjustments and changes they're making, it's all fair game. Like nobody's done anything yet. So it's all fair game, right? So as much as it sucks to say, I would definitely say my top picks here, just kind of, after overviewing, definitely would be Valyrian. The Ting is somebody that I would absolutely want to pick up here. I would say out of the RGBs, Dinah, I definitely want on my account. I still want Kraken, Chiaki the Echo. You get Gray for free, which I think he's pretty huge as well. I definitely would say like some honorable, and then I definitely want Kazumi Kazuyo. Some honorable mentions for sure would be RC77. I think that he's absolutely underrated. Viper, absolutely underrated. And I would say from there, like whatever else I get, I would just make work. But yeah, those are some of like the main targets that I really, really want. Now, again, guys, I think, like when we're kind of looking at like using the target summon banner, just to kind of touch on that a little bit, I definitely would say, like, the biggest thing with that is making sure that you use this after you kind of get enough of the units fleshed out on your account that you need or that you want. I would say like the best time to possibly use this. Some people are actually going with the game plan of waiting for them to hit their second week. And the reason why that is because of the 7-day commission, which you get in the very first one, Ling Low. But in the second phase, you get a SSR ticket guaranteed. And I want to talk about this just a little bit because one of the things that they did was they actually are increasing the potency or the chance of us being able to acquire duplicates in the game, and also with them lowering the hard or cap pities as well, it's going to make it significantly easier to rotate potentially on, say a full rotation, out of 80 pulls, you being able to pull something instead of 100 on the limited summon banners. So they made it, and they're making it much easier for us to be able to obtain units. Now, what this means is that inherently getting dupes are actually going to feel a little bit worse than they already did. But that being said, I think that one of the best things that you can do for your account, if you want to be a super bin maxer, you could try to wait till week 2 to use your target selection or target summon ticket so that you're not necessarily getting a dupe. I mean, if you want to dupe for a character that you're using, by all means, sure. But I feel like for those that are looking for, trying to flesh out or maybe fill in things that they might be missing, because you might be one of those players that you just don't pull a certain character, that's worth considering, right? I would definitely say I might use mine a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for those that were, kind of considering like, hey, what about the elements of RNG? I would say the best way to safeguard it is to play it safe, right? There's really no telling, especially for those that are doing a rebate, like you might not even reroll altogether because you spent money. Yeah, I would say that's worth considering, man. So yeah, guys, that's going to be ultimately my game plan in terms of the units that I'll be kind of picking. I feel like I wanted to kind of take some time to dissect those a little bit more. I know we talked about it a little bit, in the patch note video, but this was a little bit more in thought and just in terms of application. I had some time to kind of sit on, what was really happening to some of these characters. But yeah, that's basically going to be that, guys. Let me know what your game plan is. Has anything changed for you? Are there some, units that you're now looking at, as new prospects, or are things, relatively the same for you? So that's gonna be that with this one, guys. Everyone, stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.